Hello everyone and welcome back to my opinion. And in this preview video, we'll be looking at the side that has entertained us with all the highs and all the lows and has a passionate fan base to go with it, and that is of course the Royal Challengers Bangalore. Things have been improving for RCB in the last 3 seasons. In 2020, they lost the last 4 league games and lost out to SRH in the Eliminator. In 2021, they won the first 5 games of their campaign, finished third and lost out to KKR in the Eliminator. And in 2022, they went one step further, getting to qualifier 2 before losing out to the Rajasthan Royals. And 2 things that I enjoyed watching from them in the previous season was that their domestic Indian batsmen got vital contributions to get their side to a good score, and the bowlers helped the team stay in the game and they ultimately defended the score. Something that we haven't seen as much in previous seasons. I think this is a more subtle RCB than previous years, and I think this version of RCB can stay in games a lot more than the previous version could. I don't know if this year will be their year in terms of winning the trophy, but I think they can get to the playoffs, and if things go well for them, they certainly will get to the playoffs. And with the trajectory the last 3 seasons have been going, I think RCB and their fans can hope that maybe this season they can do more than what they did in the previous one. They didn't have much to do in the mini auction, they didn't have too much money left. And with the 2 overseas slots available, they bought Reece Topley and Will Jacks. The first of which I think will play quite a big part for them this season. With the injury situation of Josh Hazlewood, he's been injured most of the time in the last while. And especially when playing in Bangalore for 7 games, I can think you'd rather play Reece Topley than Josh Hazlewood. And in the last year or so, Reece Topley, his stocks have risen as a bowler. And as of now, I think he's a better death bowler than Josh Hazlewood is. So in Bangalore, I think that they wouldn't mind playing Reece Topley ahead of Josh Hazlewood. Yes, Josh Hazlewood, if he isn't available, would be a huge loss. 20 wickets he took in the previous season. You saw what he did with the new ball. But I think even if they don't have him for this season, they've got an able replacement in Reece Topley. And Will Jacks has been ruled out due to injury, and so they signed Michael Bracewell as a replacement player. We saw what he did against India in the ODI, where him and Mitchell Santner resurrected the game when New Zealand were, I think, 130 for 7 or so. And they got so close to winning the game when Michael Bracewell scored 141. And I think in terms of a replacement player for Will Jacks, a different kind of player. You think Will Jacks is a more hard-hitting player, not as much a bowler, even though he is listed as an all-rounder. And you think on the bowling front, they've got a better bowler in Michael Bracewell. But at the same time, I thought they could have signed another player in the mini auction itself, where if you compare the types of players that these two are, one being Michael Bracewell and the other one being Sikandar Raza, I think if you're going to play Michael Bracewell in the middle order, would he do something that Sikandar Raza does very well, which he can give injections of momentum by scoring quick 20 odds, for example. You wouldn't say, especially with what I've seen so far, I wouldn't put Michael Bracewell in that mode. And with his bowling, yes, Michael Bracewell can be helpful on turning tracks, but we've seen Sikandar Raza bowl in a variety of different conditions. And even in Australia in the T20 World Cup, he bowled 3 overs more often than not and bowled well. I think to ban the middle order and give vital overs, I think he would have been probably a better fit for that role than Michael Bracewell. But they signed Will Jacks and expected him to be fit. He wasn't fit. And so since Sikandar Raza was signed by the Punjab Kings, they've signed Michael Bracewell in the end. And Glenn Maxwell also, his availability is in question. I think he returned after a long injury layoff for the India ODI series, didn't play the 3rd ODI, and I don't know his injury status now. So will he start for the first game? We'll have to see. And if he is ruled out injured, which we don't know yet, they haven't named a replacement player, so they may have to play someone like a Michael Bracewell at number 4. And Rajat Patidar, I think, would be a huge miss this season. I think with what he did last season, he struck at 150, scoring 300 odd runs. 250s and a century in the knockout game against LSG. He was fantastic the previous season. He'll miss at least the first half of the IPL, and they've got an able backup in Suyash Prabhudesai, who especially in the cameo against CSK showed that he's a good player. But of course, someone like a Rajat Patidar will be missed for them this season. So 3 injury concerns for them. I think they've got a replacement for Josh Hazelwood, and even if he has to play for 14 games, they wouldn't mind. Glenn Maxwell will have to see if he turns up or not, and Rajat Patidar, at least for the first half of the season, he won't turn up. So they've got 3 injury misses there. While they'd like key performance from the previous season to have great seasons once again, they'd want players who didn't have a great time the last time around to bounce back, and one of those players being Virat Kohli. He's the highest run scorer in the history of this competition on aggregate and has had statement IPL seasons in the past, especially the one in 2016. As for how I think he'll go this season, I think it will be a lot less of a struggle this time around than in the previous year, simply because the confidence has returned. As you would know from my previous videos, I wasn't a fan on jumping on the bandwagon over the century debate and then joining in with it, but it was a debate that was going on for a long while, and since his return in the Asia Cup after taking a break, he's got 5 of those. So I think the confidence has returned somewhat. And I think, last season he scored 340 runs and he couldn't really find fluency at all for the most part. So I think in terms of taking it from 340 to 400, I think the confidence boost should do that. And is he near the player that he was before? I don't think so by any means, and there is some way to get back to that player. But I think simply from a confidence perspective, he is more likely to contribute, and I think you can expect at least 400 runs from him this season. And regarding the template of his T20 batting, it still has remained the same. If he bats in the power play, he goes semi-aggressively, and especially if he does open the batting. And between over 7 to 15, he slows down, and at the death, no one could do what Virat Kohli does. And the difference between previous years and now is not the template, because the template's the same. But before, if he was 50 or 40 balls going into the death, he would be there to give that kick at the death, and more often than not, he would execute. I think now he gets out well before that stage at times, and also if he does get to that launch pad stage, he gets out rather than kicking on. So that is a difference from the previous seasons, and let's see how he does this year. But I think you can at least expect a 400-run season from him this year. And now on the captain, Faf du Plessis, the evergreen Faf du Plessis. I wouldn't say he retired from national duty because they seem to have moved on from him, and I don't know why, because he scored runs in every franchise T20 competition that he's gone to. 2 titles with CSK, and once again a 400 plus run season in the latest season of the IPL. And something that's impressed me is, and I expected this effect, was his effect as captain on the side, especially the bowling attack, where we've seen the bowlers defend scores in a convincing manner a lot of the time. And in the game that RCB stumbled on in the previous 2 seasons against SRH and KKR, the first eliminator, they turned up against LSG and won in some style. And I think Faf du Plessis is the right captain to continue this, or rather to oversee this continuing progression for RCB, or of RCB, in the last few seasons. And I'm expecting him to do great things with the bat once again this year, and he'll be vital to their chances this season. Another player that had a fabulous season last time was Dinesh Karthik. Ridiculous numbers. Now, if someone's played 15, 16 games, gets 330 runs, if they were a player who plays second fiddle in the top 4, maybe a domestic player, they'd be happy with that as a minimum. Now, this is a player who has faced 180 balls in the entirety of the competition over 16 games. That's less than 12 balls a game. He scored 330 runs at a strike rate of 183. And I think I have labelled him as the best finisher in the world since 2017. A ridiculous season last year. He got back into the Indian side, played the T20 World Cup, and was dropped. Do I think he'll have that kind of a season, or close to that kind of a season at this time around? I don't know. Will he have the incentive? I mean, we've seen Dinesh Karthik make a comeback a lot of times now, but I feel like, they've dropped him now where I thought it was a very harsh call to drop him. I wouldn't be surprised if he has another great season, and he certainly has the skills to do so, as we've seen for the last few years. But it'll be interesting to see how he is after being dropped from the Indian side once again. A very harsh drop, like I've mentioned. And Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that he provided the previous season was, along with the other domestic players in the side who pulled their weight, he was that real advantage at the end where he walks out, and even if he faces what 2 overs or so every game, he gets those quick fire runs and helps his team get to a great score for their bowlers to defend. So I wouldn't be surprised if he has another great season at this time around, but we'll wait and see what he does. And the debutant in the previous season in Mayanendu Hasaranga, and I was skeptical as to how he would go especially as a replacement for Yuzvendra Chahal. Yuzvendra Chahal is a player who's absorbed so much pressure for RCB in the previous years, and I think it may be a challenge for him this year. I'm talking about Hasaranga here, bowling in the Chinnaswamy Stadium for 7 games. We'll see how he goes in that regard. But in the previous season, I think 26 wickets in the 16 games that he played, a great debut season. And something that I would like to see more of is his influence with the bat. We know he does have a batting ability, but whether it be for international cricket or in the IPL that we saw, I think at times he scores a quick 530 odd here and there, but I think if he, like we have seen some other bowling all-rounders do, if you maximize your batting while retaining your main skill, then I think you'll become that much of a better commodity. And while Hasaranga is a very good commodity, I think him realizing his batting potential more will help him as a player and will help RCB as well, if and when they need his batting ability. But in your first season, if you are going head-to-head for the purple cap, for the player that people are skeptical if you replicate the success that he's got in the franchise, then that's a great effort, especially in the debut season. So let's see if he continues that at this time around. And he's been in some good form in this format as well. Regarding their starting 11, this is what I think they could go with. Faf du Plessis and Virat Kohli opening the batting, with Suyash Prabhudesai at number 3. They could play Glenn Maxwell for subject to fitness, and if he is ruled out, it'd be interesting to see who they bring in. They could play Michael Bracewell at 4, but I don't think he fills the role that Glenn Maxwell played in this side. You got Mahipal Lumrod at 5, Dinesh Karthik at 6, Shahbaz Ahmed at 7, Wanindu Hasaranga at 8, and Harshal Patel at number 9. And if you've got Harshal Patel at number 9 in a side, then that shows you've got a lot of batting depth. And you can interchange the last two, Reece Topley at 10, and Mohammad Siraj at number 11. And regarding and the side does look good, of course, and regarding the impact player from a bowling point of view, they've got an Avinash Singh who just a year ago was playing tennis ball cricket, and he's been picked up in the recent mini auction by RCB. And I think he could get a regular look in, because as far as established Indian seamers go, they've only got Harshal Patel and Mohammad Siraj in the squad. They've got Siddharth Goel, but I think they would be looking to give someone new a go. And with how much everyone is talking about Avinash Singh and the speeds that he can bowl, then I think he will be the player that gets a look in. And regarding an impact player from the batting side, the fact that Rajat Patidar isn't fit for a full season is something that they wouldn't have wanted to happen. I think he would have batted in the top 3 if he was available for 14 games, and Suyash Prabhudesai would have been their impact player, and he would have been a handy impact player because we've seen on occasions in the previous season that he can bat in the middle order. And without the luxury of another proper batsman as an impact player, then they've got Sonu Yadav, the all-rounder, I think, looking through their squad. But apart from that, they don't have that luxury that they would have had, and that is something that, they would kind of be thinking if only Patidar was fit for 14 games. But it does look a good side, and I think Glenn Maxwell's fitness will be the key at number 4. Looking at replacement players, I can't think of too many at the top of my head, although there may be some there. And I certainly don't think you could play Michael Bracewell to fill that same role. He could play a different role. You've got players like Prabhudesai and Mahipal Lumrod who do go at a good rate, and you could play Michael Bracewell who can do a job at that number 4. So he can play his own role, but I certainly don't put him in the same mode as a Glenn Maxwell with the role that Maxwell played in this side. It does look a good side, and if things go well, if you've got an improved season from Virat Kohli, Faf du Plessis upholding his usual standards, and the domestic Indian players playing like they did in the previous season, you've got Dinesh Karthik who does even close to what he does in the previous season. and a bowling attack that responds just how they did in the previous season. I think RCB can qualify for the playoffs. I don't know if they can win the tournament, but they certainly will have a good season with how things look. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Please share it with a friend. Remember, this is my opinion. What's yours?